We go into our time of meditation. So I invite you all to join me. And let's start just by gently closing our eyes, or perhaps finding a spot to gently gaze out on the floor. And as we go into our meditation, we breathe and we become centered. We find that center within that heart space where the divine is alive and well inside of each and every one of us. We allow our chair to support us, and we allow our feet to root to Mother Earth, drawing up the power and the energy and the vibration that lives within this beautiful planet. And within our meditation today, we remember what's true. We remember that we are free from fear. We are free from illness. We are free from disease. We are free from anything that threatens our higher good. And as we realize our freedom from these things, we always go back to what's true. The truth that we are whole. The truth that we are healthy. And the truth that we are always surrounded by this beautiful healing white light, the divine. And during this time, we remember the 12 abilities that our co-founder Charles Fillmore so often referred to as our 12 powers. And we remember and we connect to those powers, specifically drawing forth strength. The strength that lives in each and every one of us. And as we remember that strength, we send it out beyond this sanctuary, out into our Unity of Madison community that's at home, into the community of Madison, into this country and beyond, out into the world. We draw upon our wisdom. That wisdom that lives inside of each and every one of us, that we send out into our healthcare professional communities, into our scientific communities, into all that are working on ensuring that we keep this earth a safe and healthy place to live for all. And we connect to our 12th power of elimination, where we eliminate things such as fear, things such as the feelings of fright from possible isolation, anything that no longer serves our highest good. We eliminate those things today, and we draw upon that power of elimination. And we also remember today that there is nothing that love can't fix. There is nothing that love can't touch. So as we prepare to enter into our moment of silence, I ask that you remember that you are a part of that love. And everyone and everything on this planet is a part of that love. And as we enter into our moment of silence today, I invite you to join me in sending that love out into the world and to surround each and every being on this planet with that love as we enter into our moment of silence. And as we begin to bring our presence back to this present moment, back to this time and space, I invite you to remember that we don't just draw upon these powers, we are these powers. I invite you to silently affirm after me, I am strength. I am wisdom. I am love. And I invite you to remember these things, not just for yourself, but for all. We hold all in this wonderful, beautiful, magnificent strength and love and power and wisdom that we are. So I'll take a deep breath and just remember. Remember your truth. Remember our truth. And so it is. Namaste. And now we continue to affirm these wonderful things with our New Lord's Prayer. For those of you who may be tuning in to our live stream for the first time today and have never visited Unity of Madison, that was our Unity Jazz Band. So let's hear it once again for the Unity Jazz Band. Woo! And I also don't know how much people online could see, but Carl has graced us with his presence today and had us dancing and was dancing during the jazz. So that was a special treat. Thank you, Carl, for keeping our spirits lifted. All right. So today I just want to start by, we are obviously streaming live today because we have asked everyone to just please stay in their homes for our personal protection. But I also want to remind you all that it goes back to what I was saying in the meditation. We sometimes feel fear, and it can sometimes kind of start to really sink in and get the best of us. But the thing to remember is that we feel fear. We are not fear. And anytime you're feeling that, I invite you to remember to draw up on those things that are within you. We have the divine within us, but we also draw up on strength. To know that with the divine within us, there's nothing we can't get through, especially when we are together. And you've got this Unity community. Our doors may not be open on Sundays, but we are here for you throughout the week. So if you are feeling fear or anything that doesn't serve your highest good, please call us. We've got our prayer chaplains here to support you. I am here to support you. You are not alone out there. Now, I did want to share something that was shared with me yesterday from Joy Morgan, who is one of our congregants and was just recently our board on our board of trustees. And I wanted to read something that she shared, and it's called "Pandemic" by Lynn, and I hope I'm saying her her last name correctly, Ungar. What if you thought of it as the Jews considered the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel. Cease from buying and selling. Give up, just for now. Or trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all of the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, as long as you shall live. And Miss Lynn Ungar wrote that on March 11th, 2020, so it's a very recent piece that I thought was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me, Joy. That's very beautiful. So we've heard a lot about the coronavirus and the pandemic, and my first thought as a minister was like, oh no, I need to rewrite my message to address that. But you know what? I think we're hearing a lot about that on the news and on social media. So here at the Unity of Madison today, we are going to continue with Lent. We are going to continue to honor our third week of Lent. So I'm happy to have our audience here and the people that we have here today. So a couple weeks back, as I mentioned, we began our observance of Lent. And I talked about how during this time that many religions or faith communities, they tend to give something up during the season of Lent. So I wanted to circle back around this today and talk a little bit more about why and where this originated. Now, many of you may know, depending on what faith tradition you grew up in, but it all started with Jesus, our master metaphysician. And when I think about Jesus, I like to think about Jesus as this really fierce guy. I mean, he was a tough cookie, wasn't he? Every picture we see of him, he's walking around barefooted. I mean, you got to be tough to walk around barefooted through the desert and things like that. I joke about that, but I really do think about Jesus as being this fierce kind of guy. When he set out to do something, he did it. He wasn't playing around. He didn't play games with people. He set out to do something, and he accomplished it. So is anybody in here familiar with the story about the healing at the pool with Jesus? Yeah, I knew there would be some. Now, in the Bible, John 5, 1 through 8 tells the story about this. Now, keep in mind that as I read these verses, it uses some words that I wouldn't choose to use here at Unity, but I want to read the verses as it was written. So sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, Jesus asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. Jesus didn't look at him and say, "Oh, you poor thing laying there by the pool. Here, let me help you over to the water." No, Jesus blatantly tells him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." Almost like a "what are you waiting for? It's time to help yourself" type of situation. And it wasn't with just this specific man laying by the pool. Jesus was all over the place during his time, said to be helping other people. He wasn't out there saying, here, let me do the work for you. He was challenging people to do the work for themselves. He was teaching them how to draw from their own power and how to get it done. So the season of Lent is 40 days long. And there's a reason for this, and that reason is Jesus. Remember when I mentioned Jesus being fierce, who I like to think of as a fierce guy? He was fierce here. He fasted, the parable goes that he fasted for 40 days and for 40 nights. And he wasn't just walking around like we think about fasting nowadays, and I think we think about, hunger or something like that, going without food. But Jesus wasn't walking around in a state of hunger for 40 days. I mean, he might have been, but it doesn't really mention that as much. But the story tells us that he was undergoing quite a bit of temptation by a character that the Bible refers to as the devil. That's why some people refer to this time of Jesus fasting as the temptation of Christ. You might also hear it referred to as that way as well. Because it seemed that no matter where Jesus turned, there was the devil waving some kind of temptation in his face. And the story goes that at one point, which is found in Deuteronomy 8:3 of the Bible, the devil says to Jesus, "Turn these stones to bread." And Jesus turns around and says back to him, "One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God." Then in Deuteronomy 6:16, the devil tells Jesus to throw himself down from the temple. Jesus then in turn replies with, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." And we'll talk more about these in a minute. But it was stated that Jesus often related this story in the form of a parable. There are people who take the story literally. There are some, the church I grew up in would take the story very literally. And there are those that don't. But either way, I believe it can be said that Jesus was on a spiritual journey of sorts during those 40 days and 40 nights. This kind of lost my place too. It's a little different doing this online. But our book talks about our, I'm still going along with our Feasting and Fasting book of 2020. And our book talks about, which I think is quite ironic due to the whole coronavirus thing going on right now, but it talks about fasting from hiding behind a mask. Who would have thought when this was written that this was going to be going on? But Jesus proved during his 40 days, during those 40 days that he was fasting, that he knew who he was. He felt no need to prove himself to anyone. He was very much in touch with that Christ consciousness within, and he didn't feel the need to try to convince anybody of that. So first, I want to talk about the devil for a little bit and what the devil is here at Unity. Do we even believe in the devil or a fallen angel by the name of Satan? The answer to that question is yes and no. According to the Metaphysical Dictionary, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore defines Satan as the deceiving phase of mind in man that has fixed ideas in opposition to truth. So plainly stated, the devil is what tempts us. It's that temptation we have when we begin to believe anything other than truth. Much like what happened to Jesus over the course of his 40 days. Anytime a thought other than truth entered the mind of Jesus, he would refute it. Because he knew it wasn't truth. And he knew that he wouldn't be true to his authentic self if he were to claim any falsehoods as truth. So as a result, Jesus chose to feast on his authentic self. He chose to feast on the fact that he was indeed a unique expression of the divine. And he didn't feel the need to prove this to anybody. In our book, Reverend Bill Englehart reminds us, I dine on the divinity within myself and in others. I let the falseness of obscuring the truth fall away like the dropping of a physical mask. I feast on being my original, real, authentic self. So how was it that Jesus held steadfast to his authentic self, though? How did he do that? One of the key phrases lies in one of the Bible verses I mentioned earlier. In Deuteronomy 6:16, when tempted by the devil, Jesus responds, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. And what does that even mean more on a metaphysical level? Metaphysically, the word Lord means one presence and one power, which we know at unity is God the good. And we are all a part of this one presence and this one power. And Jesus knew this. Jesus knew this, and he claimed it, and he did so by being and staying true to his authentic self. He did it by knowing who he was and by not letting what anyone else thought about him hinder this knowledge. Now, I also can't help but notice another thing about Jesus during his 40 days of temptations. Never once did we read in the Bible where it seemed that Jesus flew off the handle when he was challenged. Deuteronomy likely would have read a whole lot differently had that happened. Jesus might not have told the story in such a calm fashion. Otherwise, the devil may have said to Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, turn these stones to bread." And Jesus may have said back, "You know what? I am sick and tired of asking you to prove myself. In fact, why are you even asking me to prove myself? You think I can't handle it? You think I'm incapable or irresponsible? I have an idea. How about I take these stones and I instead throw them at your head, devil?" But no, Jesus, being who he was and being held steadfast in his truth, thoughtfully answers, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. So, I mean, how much more thoughtfully can a person really answer a question, especially in those types of circumstances? I mean, Jesus could have taken these challenges really personally, couldn't he? Instead, I would imagine that the devil decides, I'm going to throw down the gauntlet. He throws down the gauntlet in the form of these challenges, and that Jesus paused for a moment. Jesus took a breath. He became quiet and centered, composed himself, and then provided his thoughtfully mannered answer. So when Jesus told this parable to the crowds, he was also letting everyone else know how they could do the same. There really is no other way if we want to keep the peace with others and with ourselves, right? There's no other way but by staying within that calm center. Because overreacting is likely just going to work everybody up that's involved. What may have been the devil's response if Jesus had told him he was going to instead take those stones and throw them at his head? Jesus probably would have gotten riled up with anger, for one thing. He would have probably let the anger get the best of him. Or perhaps even begin to doubt his true abilities and who he really was, due to having even been challenged in the first place. Then the devil, more than likely, would have gotten more angry in response to, and responded in a similar way. You're going to throw stones at my head, huh? Yeah, we'll see about that. Two can play at that game. I will just pick them up and throw them right back. Heck, I'll even find larger stones to throw at you. And then it just gets out of hand. It just starts rolling downhill from there. So my own story with this kind of thing is my sister calls me several months ago before I even knew that I was going to be coming to Madison. And my sister, bless her, she's one of those. She loves to give that unsolicited advice. Just loves it. So she calls me several months ago and she starts talking about moving. And I hear her say, "Why don't you and Mindy think about eventually moving back to Texas? The cost of living is cheaper. Veterans get these big tax breaks. It would be wonderful for you." And I'm thinking, here we go again with the unsolicited advice. She knows how I feel about Texas most of the time. And she's here telling me that I need to move. So I just kind of blank out a little bit from the conversation at that point, and I feel myself getting a little resistant, probably a little bit of anger if I'm telling the truth. However, I felt a little guilty later on, because if I had paused and listened, I would have also caught that she mentioned that she and her family were also thinking about relocating back to Texas. And in reality, she was only hoping that Mindy and I would do so as well so that we could all be closer. Yet my overreaction to what she was saying prevented me from hearing that. And of course, I had to call and apologize. Now in our book, Reverend Karen Shepard talks about overreacting. And she states, "I remain calm and centered in the face of upset and confusion. I remember that the event itself does not cause the overreaction. Rather, it is my reaction to the event that can be troublesome. And I always have a choice to respond rather than react. So there it is. That tells us that it's not even the event itself, but our reaction to the event. Again, going back to Jesus and thinking about the way he reacted when he was being given these challenges. It really had nothing to do with the devil at all. The devil was just going to be the devil. And how he chose to be really had nothing to do with Jesus at all. And it's so often the same way with us. How I choose to react to another person really isn't even about that other person at all. I mean, certainly this person may have a history of bullying others or of trying to elicit angry reactions from others. But at the end of the day, it still all boils down to my reaction to it. It all boils down to stopping our imaginations from running completely wild with whatever it is that may be causing an unfavorable reaction. Jesus could have thought, oh man, what's going to happen if I don't turn these stones into bread? Is the devil going to run out and tell everybody that I wasn't able to do it? What will people think then? Will they think I'm a fraud? And so forth. It's about always bringing ourselves back to our truth of who it is we really are. And it's about the realization that we always have a choice as to how to respond. Always. In our book, Reverend Karen reminds us, I can pause anywhere or at any time. It only takes a moment. The pause gives me time to set aside emotions that may bubble up and allow me to recover my composure. I turn to God for guidance and follow the inspiration of wisdom, allowing another way to emerge. So another thing that I caught from this story of Jesus fasting is the fact that nowhere in the parable does he seem to feel like he's in competition with the devil. He didn't care whether he was outsmarting the devil or he didn't feel like he was in any kind of competition with him. Jesus just was. I mean, when the devil mentioned the stones and the bread, Jesus could have come back and said, I know how to solve this. Why don't we just see who can throw the stones the furthest? May the best person win. Or the best fallen angel. I don't know, however you want to word it. But he didn't do that. Not once did he seem to think that he wasn't enough based on the challenges that the devil was throwing out to him. Instead, he remembered truth. And he reminded the devil that he knew his truth. And nothing the devil said was going to change that. For Jesus, it wasn't about competition. It just was. It was truth. So you see, Jesus knew he was enough, just as he was. He knew that he was enough to survive anything that the devil or that the world threw out to him or challenged him with. Like I mentioned earlier, he didn't need to prove it to anybody. In fact, he discussed this during his Sermon on the Mount, which is found in Matthew 5:41 of the Bible, when Jesus said, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He went the 2nd mile. So I started writing this talk earlier in the week, but yesterday it really kind of hit me as to how we are currently going the 2nd mile right here and right now. We didn't talk about this today, but we can take these teachings from Jesus and we can sit in confidence. We can sit in truth and we can sit in our authentic selves. We can be still and we can allow God or the divine to sing its song through us. When we do, there is nothing that can pull us away from our truth. We know that we don't have to do anything but just simply show up. Show up as our authentic selves. When we do, we also begin this cooperation with the universe. The cooperation to allow our voice, the voice of the divine, to sing from within. This wonderful voice that tells us, you are an amazing, unique, and wonderful spirit. You are important. You matter to this world. You are a vital part of this universe. This world, the cosmos, can never be quite complete without you. So today I want to remind you all that you are. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. It doesn't matter what's happening in the world around us. You are. And in that, you are wonderful. You are amazing. You have gifts to share. You are love. Psalm 8:6 of the Bible reminds us, Thou hast given dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his or her feet. You are, and I invite you to all remember that today and over the coming weeks. You are. Amen and namaste. Thank you. And really quick before I invite Josie back up again, I wanted to mention, and he's not here today obviously, but Ken Attering will be heading up a new welcome ministry for us. And he's currently looking for some members to join that team. So I want to invite you all to think about that. And if you're interested in finding out more about it, please see Ken, or there is a sign-up sheet that's out in the foyer when you come back. Just sign up on that sign-up sheet and we'll get with you and kind of talk about how this team will form and what it will be and things like that. So with that, I invite Josie up.
Thank you so much for that lovely talk.